With half a dozen UK financial regulators with overlapping jurisdictions, priorities and powers, it can often be difficult to tell your TPR from your FCA, let alone keep track of what they're doing on ESG. This short video will take you through the UK regulatory landscape with a brief overview of what regulators are doing. We'll start off with the UK Pensions Regulator, who are in charge of regulating workplace pension schemes. Both schemes themselves and the employees who pay into them fall within their purview. The current CEO is Charles Council, who's been in the role since April 2019 and was previously responsible for the rollout of automatic workplace pension enrolment. TPR are unable to be as proactive as other regulators because they mostly have to follow the lead of the Department for Work and Pensions due to their lack of rulemaking powers. In terms of ESG, it's a pretty busy time for them at the moment. The Department for Work and Pensions is currently finalising regulations for mandatory TCFD reporting for pension schemes with more than £1 billion in assets under management, which were brought in under the Pension Schemes Bill. There's been 2 rounds of consultation on the new regulations, and these are expected to come into force around October, which is also when the first wave of schemes, those with assets over £5 billion, will have to report. Pension scheme trustees have been generally welcoming of the TCFD regulations, but there have been concerns that 2021 is too early for them to have built up the institutional capability, the costs might be quite high, and that the quality of available data is low. TPR said in their climate change strategy, released at the start of April, that they would update the climate change content in their trustee toolkit and share some best practice TCFD reports to try and mitigate this. Another October deadline is for schemes with more than 100 members who have been required to set out stewardship and ESG policies in their statements of investment principles and publish these online since 2019. There was some research by UXIF in January 2020 which found that only a third of eligible schemes had done this. In their climate change strategy, TPR said that they would create an index of published SIPs to identify non-compliance, and that they would take enforcement action against schemes which weren't publishing their SIP or refusing to publish TCFD reports. The regulator has a number of escalatory enforcement powers available, which range from issuing action notices to issuing fines where the law has been broken. In extreme cases, TPR has the power to remove trustees or appoint their own independent trustees. Moving on to the Financial Conduct Authority, who are responsible for regulating financial services in the UK, amounting to around 56,000 firms, as well as some prudential regulation. The FCA have just hired Sasha Sedan from Legal and General Investment Management to become their first ever Director of ESG. Last year, they announced rules saying that companies must have a senior manager responsible for climate change. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, wrote to the FCA a month ago as part of his obligations under the Financial Services and Markets Act to make recommendations on government policy. In his letter, he asked the FCA to have regard to the government's commitment to achieve a net zero economy by 2050 and considering how to advance its objectives and discharge its functions. A similar letter was sent to the Prudential Regulation Authority, which is responsible for the prudential regulation of banks, building societies, credit unions and insurers. The government said that this meant climate change considerations are now fully embedded across UK principal financial regulators. Then we have the Charities Commission, who are responsible for the regulation of charities in England and Wales. They launched a consultation at the start of April on updated guidance for responsible investment by charities. The Commission found that some trustees were unsure about the current guidance. Responses to a January 2020 listening exercise found that some trustees felt they were unable to make responsible investments because they perceived they had an overriding legal duty to maximise financial returns, regardless of any other consideration, and that there was a perception that the Commission did not accept that trustees could comply with their duties fully if they adopted a responsible investment approach. Finally, we have the Financial Reporting Council, which oversees corporate governance, auditing and reporting in the UK. It has been criticised for lacking the appropriate powers, being too slow to act, and having too friendly a relationship with the auditing industry. In an internal review, the FRC recommended that it be replaced with an audit, reporting and governance authority with strengthened powers. However, due to the need for primary legislation, this is unlikely to happen until 2023. In 2 reviews of the industry in November 2020, the FRC criticised companies over both diversity and climate change. It found that many FTSE 100 companies viewed diversity as a box-ticking exercise and a marketing slogan, and that only a quarter of UK listed companies referenced climate change in their financial statements, and that it was unclear whether net zero commitments were reflected in company forecasts. In terms of interregulator cooperation, the regulators often have overlapping areas of interest and so work very closely together. They've also been cooperating during COVID to make sure that they're not placing a large regulatory burden on one specific sector. The regulators are also all members of the UK Regulators Network, alongside other non-financial regulators such as Ofgem and Ofcom. They have a senior steering group for large policy decisions, a working group which deals with more detailed issues. In 2018, the FCA and TPR published a joint strategy to promote cooperation between the two of them on issues of interest. The Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the Department for Work and Pensions, the FCA, TPR, FRC, PRA, and Local Government Pension Scheme are all on the joint UK TCFD task force. The government has decided that the UK should move towards mandatory TCFD-aligned disclosures in both financial and non-financial sectors, and the regulators are responsible for introducing these in their own areas of responsibility. For example, TPR and the DWP have already introduced phase-ins for TCFD reporting for large schemes, while the FCA plans to require premium listed companies to disclose by 2021, and a wider scope of listed companies and the largest asset managers, life insurers, and FCA-regulated providers by 2022. There are, however, some stumbling blocks for this. In an ideal world, TCFD reporting will be introduced first for businesses and then for financial institutions and investors. However, different regulators have different powers, and some require consultation periods of differing lengths on new regulation. For example, the DWP has gone through 2 rounds of consultation on the new regulations, and the powers had to be granted to the pensions regulator by Parliament. Finally, the FCA and the PRA established the Climate Financial Risk Forum in 2019. The forum, whose members include banks, insurers, asset managers, and pension funds, including BlackRock, BNP Paribas, and the University Superannuation Scheme, has 4 working groups on various issues, and in June 2020 published a guide to climate-related financial risk management.